Chairman for the Dallas County Republican Party, thank you so much for coming out for our Judicial Candidates Open House. Before we get going, please everyone rise so we can say our pledges. If you are a veteran who served in the United States military, you can render a hand salute to the flag as we give the Pledge of Allegiance to the American flag. And we will start off with the American flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. And now to the Texas flag. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one state, under God, one and indivisible. Yeehaw! All right, have your seats, please. Take your seats, please. Before we get started, I'd like to bring up our Executive Director, Dee Holly and Ajua Mason, for a couple of announcements.
Thank you, sir.
Well, I'm just going to give you, how do we do this here? Thank you, first of all, thank you all so much for coming. We so appreciate it. These guys and gals are these guys are so important to us. And so I'm excited to see what they're going to say, what we're going to learn tonight. And I know you are too. I asked Ajua to come up because we have a couple of really, really important events coming in. One is our Reagan Rawhide Roundup. This is so important to the success of our party. Because to be successful, I mean, if we're not successful, then it's going to be difficult to help our candidates the way we need to help them. And then she's going to talk to you about a couple more things, so I'm just going to give it to her.
All righty, so we're asking everybody to sign up. There is a QR code. You can scan your cell phone to go ahead and make that happen. We will have a silent auction. John Rich will be in concert, and we're just going to have an amazing time raising for our Dallas County Republican parties as well as our candidates. A couple other things, I'll make it real quick. We do have a Trump train parade that's going to be happening in 2 weeks. We did a very successful one yesterday, and it's coming back by popular demand. So it's going to be August the 25th at 2 o'clock, and the location will be announced. So check your emails and text messages. That will come soon. Also, we have some MAGA Trump gear here. If you want to purchase a hat, we do have.
Not purchase. Donate.
Oh, I'm sorry. Donate. Excuse me. If you would like to receive a hat for a donation of $25 to $30, depending on if it has that Trump signature on there. And we also have Trump signs for a donation of $25 as well. Candidates, if you have a candidate, a Republican candidate that is running in your district as far as the state house seats, we do also have some signs out there that you can take, as well as some Ted Cruz signs. So if you don't know if they are in your district, you can go to Who Represents Me, put in your address, and it will tell you who your elected official is. And last but not least, with the elections coming up, in early voting, I believe, starts in about 70 days or so, we do need some election judges, poll workers, greeters, all of the things to make sure that we are, keeping an eye out on what's happening at the polls. So we do need some more volunteers for that. If you would like to volunteer to be to work with the elections, we ask that you go to dallasgop.org to sign up, and we'll take care of you. Thank you.
I want to say one other thing about the Trump train. We did a Trump train yesterday, like she said. It was awesome. I mean, we had, I would say, at least
About 40 cars.
Yeah, 40 to 50 cars. And so we'll have another one, like she said, on the 25th. But for you candidates, this is a great way to promote yourself. It doesn't cost a thing. So you can have a candidate car, too.
Awesome.
Okay? Thank you.
Thank you, Dee.
Thank you, guys.
The next thing I want you to mark down on your calendars, and of course this will be on our website, dallasgop.org, is on October the 8th. October the 8th, we will have a candidate forum. It will be at the Communion Neighborhood Cooperative. That is at 514 Lockwood Drive in Richardson from 6 to 8 p.m. CBS 11 Eye on Politics, Jack Fink will be the moderator for that, so please come out. And we will also have our judicial candidates there as well, with their tables to be set up, so you get another opportunity to see and speak with our judicial candidates. The other thing is, tomorrow night I got asked to make this announcement. The Greater Irving GOP will have a meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. Pastor Rafael Cruz will be speaking, and that will be at the Spring Creek Barbecue. And Margaret Lopez, raise your hand. Margaret Lopez, if you want more information on that. A couple of VIPs I would like to say thank you for being here is Mayor Terry Lynn and City Council Member Richard Jackson of the City of Farmers Branch. So thank you all for being here with us. What's the purpose of us being here tonight? In 2018, if you remember, that was when Robert Francis O'Rourke, he is about as Hispanic as I am Norwegian, he ran for U.S. Senate. And if you remember, he barely lost that election, 2.3%. But the focus from the left was to wipe out judicial positions in Houston, Harris County, and Dallas County. We lost about 60 to 61 judicial positions. Now, why is that so important? Because when you think about the three branches of government, the executive branch, the judicial branch, and the legislative branch, that's not so important to the progressive socialist left, to the Marxists. What is important to them are the three branches of rule. That's media, academia, and the courts. And when you look at what is happening now, when we have all of these activist judges sitting on benches, and not truly people that understand the rule of law and abiding by the rule of law, and when you combine that with the fact that we have a district attorney here in Dallas County that has said that anyone committing a crime of $750 or less, they will not be prosecuted. So it's gotten to the point where the old colonel wants to get some shaving razors. When he goes to Walgreens or CVS, he's got to ask a clerk to come up there and unlock the gate or the window. Or even at the Walmart neighborhood store. Now you can't get laundry detergent because it has a little device on it. That is what happens when you allow judicial activists to be in a seat of power instead of true constitutional jurists. So tonight you're going to hear from 4 of our judicial candidates, and I just want to say for the ones that are here, Cynthia Barbera, Earl Jackson, Mike Lee, and Emily Miskell, they are out of town. And then we have a couple of district judge candidates, Leah Feldhandler and Ashley Wysocki, but you'll get an opportunity to see them on October the 8th. But tonight, we have 4 candidates for the 5th Circuit Courts of Appeal. Each one of these candidates will speak to you for about 10 to 12 minutes, and then after they have all had their opportunity to speak individually, you'll get an opportunity to have a town hall style question and answer period with each one of them. So our first 5th Circuit Courts of Appeals candidate is Matthew Kolodowski. Matthew, please come up.
Thank you so much for that introduction. It's my pleasure. Hello. How are you all doing today? Can you hear me okay? Okay, I'll try to be louder. I will tell you, most people don't ask me to be louder, but I will do my best and try. Before we get started, I want to say thank you for being here. The best part about campaigning is not raising money, I'll tell you that. It's talking to you. It's talking to the people who are committed enough to come to these events, to show that they care about this country, to show that they care about the community, and truly take an interest in elections. And I know that judicial elections are not the sexiest of the elections you will see. They're not the campaigns that get most of the attention. But as you heard in that introduction, judicial elections in Texas are incredibly important. They impact all of us. They impact our businesses. They impact our economy, and they impact our nation. So they really are important, and I appreciate each and every one of you understanding that and coming out here to hear from all of us today. So let me tell you a little bit about myself. And actually, let me preface my comments by saying when you're giving an oral argument, they tend to say it's better if you have a hot bench, which means you get questions rather than everybody just kind of sitting there staring at you. So I'm probably not going to take all of my 15, 16, 20 minutes, whatever it was.
12.
Are you sure?
Yes.
Okay. I think you have a stopwatch there and are looking
No, I
there.
have a mental note, and you will do push-ups.
Yeah, I was told that beforehand. If I went too long, I would be forced to do push-ups afterwards, but he promised that I wouldn't have to do it in front of you during the presentation. With that being said, though, I'm probably not going to take all of my time because I am looking forward to getting questions from all of you. But let me tell you a little bit about myself, my background, and my judicial philosophy if I'm lucky enough to be elected to the Court of Appeals. I am a partner at a law firm called Thompson Co. Cousins and Irons. My practice is civil litigation and civil appeals, and I specialize on insurance coverage and bad faith litigation. Now, to tell you a little bit more about who I am as an attorney, I am board certified by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. In fact, I am one of only a few attorneys in the state who has multiple of them. The first is I am board certified in consumer and commercial law. Now, if you think about it and you think about what's subsumed into those categories, it is basically everything that impacts all of you, and it impacts our economy and it impacts our businesses. To put this into a little bit of perspective, if I asked you to guess how many people have that board certification, you probably would guess hundreds of attorneys because there are so many of us in the state. There are 70. I am also board certified in insurance law. Again, this is another underpinning of our state, and it impacts each and every one of us. There are 53 attorneys in the state who have that board certification. So as you can tell by my background, I have certifications that very few people do not have, and I will tell you my opponent is not board certified in any area of law. So, I deal with a lot of businesses, and I have clients all over the country. Now, I'm not saying we need to look to other states, especially where some of my clients are located, California, New York, Florida, for our judicial approach. However, I want to give you a little bit of context, because I do have clients all over the country in those states, and I get calls from them, not necessarily on a daily basis, but more regularly than I would like. And they call me up on the phone, and they say, Matthew, what the hell is going on in Texas? Usually it's a little bit more colorful than that. I assume some of you can fill in the blanks on how they approach it. But they want to know why our courts are rendering certain decisions. They want to know why they're seeing things impacting business. And I have to explain to them, well, if you look at how the districts are drawn, we have some areas that tend to skew Democrat. We have some areas that tend to outbalance the other counties. But the truth of the matter is, it still impacts us. It impacts people. Now, our court, the one we're running for, covers Collin, Dallas, Grayson, Hunt, Kaufman, and Rockwall counties. And I've talked to people in a lot of those other counties, and a lot of them didn't understand that they shared a court of appeals with Dallas County. They thought, I'm electing Republican judges up in Collin County or Rockwall. That's what matters. They didn't think through the way these are all interconnected with the Court of Appeals. In a lot of ways, the Dallas Court of Appeals is probably the most important court most Texans, and probably many of you, hadn't thought about, hadn't heard of. And it's because this is the court that is the final stop for most of the cases in those 6 counties. I'm sure some of my colleagues or some of the other candidates up here are going to talk about that more, but you'll hear about how most cases stop at these intermediate appellate courts and they impact all of you. Now, my general approach to my general judicial philosophy is that whether you are rich or poor, you're a plaintiff or a defendant, you deserve the right to be heard. You deserve to present your case, and you deserve to have judges who listen and are humble enough to call balls and strikes, to not interject politics in their decisions, and to make sure that the judges give you what they're supposed to do. Make sure that they are there to approach the law, to call balls and strikes, and to not be political. And I will tell you, if I am lucky enough to be elected to this court, that is what I am going to do and how I am going to approach being on the bench. And with that, I'm going to, I guess, yield the remainder of my time.
The gentleman yields his time. You know, one of the things that happened in 2018, if you recall, you could go in and hit a box at the top, all Republican or all Democrat. And now things have changed, and so you have to be educated on these down ballot races. So many people know President Trump's at the top of the ticket. So many people know Mr. Cruz is running for senator. But if you don't go all the way down through this ballot, to include the initiatives that will be on this ballot, you will miss out on making sure that we can restore the rule of law. And so tonight, it is not just the fact that you're here to edify yourself, but you've got to go and take this message to those people in your precincts, in your communities, and all around to help these judicial candidates to get their name out there. I've been in the booth and I've heard people go, eeny, meeny, miny, mo. We don't want eeny, meeny, miny, mo. We want people to know exactly who they're voting for. With that being said, our next judicial candidate, who is also running in the Fifth Circuit Courts of Appeals, and that is Mr. Gino Rossini.
Do not go eeny, meeny, miny, mo in the voting booth. But if you do, I'm Mo.
I'll take Eeny.
And with that, I appreciate you yielding the remainder of your time to me. That's how it works, right, Chairman West? Okay. My name is Gino Rossini. I'm running for place 11 of the 5th District Court of Appeals. As has been mentioned, that is your state intermediate appellate court. So this is the court that handles all appeals from judgments entered in courts of record in those 6 counties that Matthew Kolodowski just mentioned: Dallas, Collin, Rockwall, Hunt, Grayson, Kaufman. That's every state court judgment entered, including family law, criminal law, civil, probate, all of it. The only exception currently is in criminal cases in which the death penalty is involved. Those appeals bypass the 5th Court of Appeals and go straight to the Court of Criminal Appeals in Austin. So just to let you know a little bit more about myself, I grew up in Richardson. My wife Rita and I live in Irving. Thank you, Rita, for coming here tonight, and thank you for supporting me in my campaign. It's definitely a group effort. Rita and I have 5 children. They went through schools in Capel and in Irving. We've got 2 now in college, 2 in high school, and 1 in middle school. I've been an attorney practicing now for 25 years. I went to the University of Texas School of Law, and after that I clerked for a judge, a federal district judge in Laredo. And when I did that, I saw him. I obviously was very green, coming right out of law school. I had academic credentials toward the top of my class, Order of the Coif, on the Bar Review, as an editor, an articles editor of the Texas Law Review. But I really didn't know much at all when it came to being a lawyer right out of law school. And the judge that I worked for was an excellent mentor because he showed me, first off, by example, how conscientious he was, how hardworking he was, how smart he was, how diligent. And his first name was George. They called him Curious George because anybody who came before him on the bench, or anyone who happened to wander back to chambers like during lunchtime, he had lots of questions for them. I clerked in Laredo. He grew up in Laredo. He knew everybody in Laredo, or their mother, or their cousin, or somebody. And he was going to, yes? Laredo. And he was going to talk to people until he made that connection. And one thing that was important to me is not only getting it right when it comes to the law, but knowing that each case isn't just a case. There are people behind each case. And it was important to him to know those people. And at that point, I thought to myself, being a judge would be something that would be, to me, a rewarding and fulfilling way to use my experience and my qualifications and my skills as an attorney. Well, 25 years later, now's the time that I'm running for place 11 of the 5th Court of Appeals. I am board certified in civil appellate law, and that is what I do every day, and I've been doing that full-time for 15 years. I have multiple cases pending before the Fifth Court of Appeals right now that I'll have to step aside from if I have the honor of taking a position on the court itself. But that's a little bit about me. My opponent is not board certified in civil appellate law or in any other area of the law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. In fact, in trying to compare my experience as a state appellate attorney with that of my opponent, I resorted to a database that the Texas government maintains of all Texas appellate matters. And anyone can do this. It's open to the public. You can put an attorney's bar number into the database, and it will come back with every case that attorney is associated with, either because they are the lead counsel or they're somewhere on the signature block, they get service on a case, they're associated with the case. So if you put my number in, you will see a little over 105, maybe 107 cases associated with my bar number. And you'll see that there are about 5 or 7 pending in the Fifth Court of Appeals, or that have been filed in the past couple of years. If you put my opponent's bar number in that same database, you will find 0 cases come back. So I'm running against an attorney who. If you put my. So according to that database, my opponent has not handled or been associated with a state appellate matter. She's database.
So sorry. Get out of here.
So that's a point of contrast I think is important, because you would want somebody in this position who has experience and who has handled appeals before to judge appeals. Another thing, just a little bit more about the court, the Fifth Court of Appeals. As Matthew said, as Chairman West has said, it covers 6 counties. It's an area in geography roughly the size of Connecticut. As of 2020, I believe, there were about 4.2 million or so people living in that area, and as we all know, that number has only increased in the past 3.5 years. So that's an area about the size of Connecticut. In other parts of the country, this would be its own state Supreme Court. But because everything's bigger in Texas, we've got a lot more than just the Fifth Court of Appeals. There are currently 14 intermediate courts of appeals in Texas. The Fifth Court of Appeals is the busiest. You might ask, well, what about Harris County? What about Houston? In Houston, they actually have split into 2 different courts of appeals. That's why the court that sits in Dallas is bigger. This court, for the last year that statistics are available, ending at the end of August of 2023, the Fifth Court of Appeals disposed of just over 1,600 cases. There are 13 justices that sit on the Fifth Court of Appeals, and they sit in panels of 3. So that means at any one time there might be 4 panels running, handling cases. When they dispose of a case, each case has to be disposed for which the court has jurisdiction has to be disposed of through a reasoned opinion that they write. So these panels are writing on average about 400 opinions, reasoned opinions, every year. It's a very busy court, and it's not one for on-the-job training. Also, the importance of this court is partly due to the role of precedent, which is a term you might be familiar with if you follow the U.S. Supreme Court, but it also applies to the Texas Supreme Court and the Fifth Court of Appeals. So today, if the Fifth Court of Appeals issues an opinion by a panel of 3, that opinion, when published, becomes precedent for the Fifth Court of Appeals, not outside of this 6-county area, but within this 6-county area. In other words, all the 4.2 million plus people who live in this area are bound by that precedent. So even though you might not have a case before the court, or before any court currently, if you have a matter that involves civil law, criminal law, family law, probate, the opinions that are being issued today by this court would bind a future controversy that is analogous. So that's another reason why this is a very important court, and it's important to look at all 8 of the positions that are open. And one question I get often, I just want to explain, these are places, so they're not geographic districts. That means that every voter in the 6 counties is eligible to vote for all 8 positions. And again, we talked about, Chairman West talked about Mr. O'Rourke and his campaign 6 years ago. The reason why that is important today and why this is an election that's very important for the life of the court is that these are 6-year terms. So those judges that were voted in with the O'Rourke Cruz campaign are now all up on the ballot. There are 13 spots. There are 12 Democrats that currently sit on the 5th Court of Appeals. There are 8 spots that are open, and you're eligible to vote for all 8 spots. So you have the opportunity to vote for 8 Republicans in this race, and if we win, we would be the majority. Just a little bit more about, well, I'm about to yield my time, but I do look forward to questions, and I hope to stick around and meet you all. So thank you very much.
2 takeaways. You heard about qualifications. Here sit people with qualifications, with certifications. But yet we have people that are making decisions about your life. They have no qualifications to do so. That's why this is so important. And again, 6-year terms. If we can't make it happen in this 2024, that means 6 more years of these people being judicial activists and not being jurists who abide by the rule of law. Now, something that is very near and dear to my heart here in Dallas County, we don't have a single elected Republican in a position in Dallas County. I'm about to introduce the person who was the last elected Republican in Dallas County. The left targeted Dallas County going back to about 2006, 2008. J.J. Koch is the last one. He was a county commissioner. And they did their normal shenanigans of redistrict him, and therefore he was defeated. And now, the measure of a man, as my mom taught me, is not how many times you get knocked down. It's how many times you get back up. And now he's running for a place in this 5th Circuit Court of Appeals. I wanted to introduce J.J. Koch.
Thank you for those very, very kind words. I was a college wrestler, so I've been knocked down plenty. And I get up pretty quick because I know there's still a fight to be had. So I want to talk a little bit about my story and ideas, because ideas matter, right? And then we can talk a little bit about just how bad things truly are. So I got here to Dallas County back in 2002. I was fortunate enough to go to Duke. I was raised in New Jersey, and most people have since forgiven me for being a Jersey boy. But my parents were very clear. You are to go where the American dream is still alive and well. And all 3 of their children did just that. My brother lives in Flower Mound now. He was in Dallas for a time. My sister's in Orlando in the great state of Florida. And they're doing pretty well, but not as good as our great state of Texas. But what was important to them was to make sure that you were going someplace where the American dream was still alive, there were still jobs, and there was still the rule of law. How many people here have had a court case where they were a party? Raise your hand. Raise your hand. If you've been a party to a court case, you've been one of the named people, you've been in that fight. All right, keep your hand up. Now, how many people that had that court case feel as though the outcome was unfair? Leave your hand raised if you believe that you were done wrong, right? There's still some people there. Now you were done wrong in that court case, right? And did you have an opportunity to appeal, right? Now, I know some of you know what's going on with our former president and soon-to-be current president and his legal cases and what's happening there and the unfairness that was levied at the trial court. And we are hoping that the courts of appeals get things right. But not every American has the ability, the money, the wherewithal, the time to file an appeal. If that district court, if that first court does not get it right, for most people, justice will not be served. And right now in Dallas County, that's very much the case. Justice is not being served in many of those courts. All right, let's go back to how how I got here and why I'm here talking about being your next Chief Justice of this Fifth Court of Appeals. I knew that I was going to be able to make something of myself being down here in Dallas, so enjoyed going to SMU Law School, met my wife there, and she's a practicing attorney as well. I had an opportunity to work as an attorney for the Dallas Fraternal Order of Police. Before that was a prosecutor. Have done jack of all trades regarding the law. I've tried some guardianship cases, have handled divorces, and most of the work that I did while I was practicing was representing the Dallas Fraternal Order of Police, representing employment matters for those police officers, and then representing them when they were criminally charged. And that happened after a death in custody or a shooting, right? So, the most difficult situations I dealt with before I ever turned 30. Right around when I turned 30, I ran for one of the county misdemeanor courts, and I was largely called to that because the woman that was on the bench at that time, she was a Republican, she switched parties, right? So in 2006, 2008, we had some judges get beat, others switched, and I was more than happy to run against her while she was a Democrat because she was the epitome of being unfair. Whatever the position she could take to clear out her docket, she would take it. She wouldn't be there on Friday. She wasn't doing the things that we look to a diligent and trustworthy judge to do, to make sure that when people walk in the door, they feel as though I have shot fairness, and when they walk out, most importantly, when they walk out of that court, they feel as though that they received the measure of fairness that they deserve as Americans. Now, I had an opportunity to do a whole host of things. Started a tech company, worked for a company called Thomson Reuters, and was doing legal technology work for a time. And while doing that legal technology work, had reached the height of my earning capacity, and my wife always reminds me of this. And I decided this wasn't really making me happy. I was about 40 or 50 pounds heavier than I am right now, which clearly is a sign that I'm not happy. My wife knows when I get fat, I'm unhappy. So, what's going on? Well, there's no fight there. And I had an opportunity to run for Commissioner's Court. This was, we've seen it in Dallas County, the unfairness and the terrible things that go on in that Commissioner's Court. I had an opportunity to fight. And I was elected to that Commissioner's Court, and I did have a great opportunity to fight. Some of you may remember when Judge Jenkins decided to defy the orders of the governor and require masking. I refused to put on a mask. I was kicked out of the court in violation of the Open Meetings Act. I sued him, and that triggered a lawsuit that went all the way up to the Supreme Court. We won, and just recently, settlement has finally come together. But I want to just touch upon this real quickly. I'll have my attorney's fees paid. I will have money from the Commissioner's Court, from Dallas County. But here's the problem. Over $500,000 was spent on Judge Jenkins' friends and attorneys, including Andrew Summerman's firm, the guy who beat me, because he didn't care if he lost, right? It wasn't win or lose. It was the almighty dollar sign. He had an opportunity to pay his buddies to defend these cases all the way up to the Supreme Court with your money, with your taxpayer dollars, to initiate and continue that lawsuit when he should have done the right thing and folded. But that's just a little piece of what's going on in those courts, and I'll explain a little more about that. So on the evening that I had lost, my son was crushed. And it's still awesome to be the hero of your son. And he's out in the backyard, and he's in his little suit. He's 10 years old at the time. He's in his little suit. He's pacing back and forth and occasionally flopping. And all he could say was, "This isn't fair. This isn't fair. You did a great job, Dad. Everyone says you did a great job." And I tell him, I was like, "Listen, when it comes to the political process, I stood up in that very court when the 4 Democrats were attacking our Republican legislature for redistricting in such a way that Republicans were advantaged. I said, listen, you live and die by the sword." And at that time, I defended the Republicans' right to do this and said at the time, I know that possibly I could face the same fate when you redistrict here after the 2020 census. And in fact, that's what happened, because I gave them enough hell that they were going to redistrict me out because I made sure not to let them get away with it. And now, unfortunately, they're getting away with it even more. And again, these are lessons that I'm teaching my son, and these are things that you all need to hear right now. Very, very important. 3 of your county commissioners are plaintiffs' attorneys or plaintiffs' attorneys connected. Dr. Elba Garcia, her husband is Domingo Garcia, one of the biggest plaintiffs' attorneys in the Hispanic community. Clay Jenkins is a part of Long Car Jenkins Lions, advertised all over the place. There's your county judge selling himself on the side of buses for more cases in front of courts where he controls the purse strings. And Andrew Summerman, my replacement, handles some appellate matters, but also handles those very same plaintiffs' matters. How do you think their wealth has increased over the time they've been on that court? Folks, it's increased incredibly. And you can just look at the real estate they've purchased. Now, Andrew Silverman, as soon as he won, bought 2 new houses. You can look him up on DCAN. It's unbelievable how our courts have been essentially prostituted to those with political power, okay? And that is just a small caption of what's going on in our courts. Because then you have, on the criminal side, you have the criminal side that has been totally swept in identity politics. I am one of 17 district judges. I was very fortunate after I'd lost my race, governor's people got out and knew of my background and knew I was encouraged to apply for an open position one of the criminal judges had won her race to become an appellate justice, and that spot was open. So they encouraged me to apply, and I now sit on the criminal district court number 2. So I'm currently a sitting judge, and when given the opportunity to either defend this bench or run for the Court of Appeals, I was encouraged by the governor's folks and other folks to run for this Chief Justice spot because I have some administrative experience. I certainly have rule of law experience, but also have intimate knowledge of the problems, the deep corruption problems that are going on here in Dallas County. So we have individuals that are running for these 8 spots that have tremendous knowledge of what the state of the law truly is, not what they want to have happen for their friends, but what the state of the law truly is, and will be willing to execute what the legislature has put before them. Truly rule of law individuals, textualists. We take our orders from the legislature and apply them fairly, according to the facts that we are given. That is not happening in Dallas County, and unfortunately, even though there are great jurists in Collin County, their good rulings are perverted by that Court of Appeals when they have an opportunity to get a hold of a case and render a ruling, send it back. And if you're just a businessman with even a solid $10 million business, how many times can you afford for a particular issue to go back and forth until you're bankrupted? That Court of Appeals protects bad rulings here in Dallas County and creates bad rulings in the adjacent counties where you have good folks that are doing great work in those local governments to encourage growth in Collin County and Kaufman County. We're seeing it grow by leaps and bounds. But they will quickly have their heads cut off if you continually have the plaintiff's friendly venue of the Court of Appeals protect bad rulings starkly opposed to what the legislature has given them. And what's truly troubling for every one of us, right? If you held up your hand and said, I got a bad ruling, isn't that just the heart of the American court system? We fully believe, we're not Soviet Russia, we're not even any of the European nations where people routinely talk about the terrible corruption that goes on in those courts, the political garbage, and how people are never seen again, even in supposedly modern Western countries. We pride ourselves that anyone can walk into one of those courts and get fairness. And if it's not gotten right the first time, it usually gets right the second time. And if it hasn't got right that time, you still have another appeal, and usually somewhere someone gets it right. But for the vast majority of cases that go before this Court of Appeals, a very, very small fraction are ever appealed to the Supreme Court. So when we talk about all those bad rulings, eventually someone runs out of money, right? It costs money we're well-dressed individuals. Of course we get paid well as attorneys. When you look at those cases, the most critical case in someone's life, and how it'll never fully be resolved or properly resolved, because they can't afford to take it to the Supreme Court. Less than 10%, far less than 10%. Sometimes it's only as few as 2% of cases will be taken up on cert by the Texas Supreme Court. If it is not gotten right by that Court of Appeals, justice will be denied. So again, when I go back to my son and I teach him about it, what do I do in my court? Every day I make sure to apply the law, take the time to be there, look at the facts, understand it, explain it clearly on the record, because if I got it wrong, as a good judge, you have the humility to believe you may have got something wrong, you may have missed something. The record is complete, so when it goes to appeal, God willing, it gets right at that point, right? That is not happening in our courts of original jurisdiction here in Dallas County, and it's certainly not being rectified up on that Court of Appeals. So we can talk a lot about, and I know this happens all the time, I don't know these candidates. I don't know if I should vote for them. Most of the time, the trite thing that we'll say is, well, if you don't vote for the Republican you don't know, you're going to get the Democrat you don't want, okay? That's bad enough. That's bad enough, right? And we used to say that, but I will tell you this. If you don't vote for the Democrat, for the Republican, you don't know. You will get the Democrat that will actively destroy your quality of life here in North Texas. You have a number of plaintiffs' lawyers that are enriching themselves, and Barron and Budd, all the rest of them, all these big plaintiffs' firms will have their big verdicts sustained there at that Court of Appeals level, and it's never going to make it to the Texas Supreme Court, even though the Texas Supreme Court in many instances would reverse some of the ridiculousness, but there's just not enough time, not enough money, that eventually someone gives up and injustice prevails. That is what is on the line. Not just a Democrat you don't like. Oh, he hurt my feelings. She hurt my feelings. No. Your son or daughter could be a victim of crime, and that individual that commits the crime will be released at some point because of a blatant misinterpretation of the penal code. Your son or daughter can start their business and be very successful and get sued by one of those favored plaintiff's attorneys, and their business will be gone. Because it's already happened. We've already seen it happen. I, as a judge, have seen things like that happen. These men and women have seen something similar. So to make it so clear, I tell my son about fairness. I teach my kids that the most important thing you can do is be strong enough and be disciplined enough, be the shepherd, and make sure that you create a world where people are treated fairly and given the opportunity they deserve according to their merit. What's the other side teaching their families? Take what you can, when you can, by any means possible. We have to win. Because if we don't have much left. Thank you.
You know, we had a saying in the United States military, and it really does kind of apply to what JJ was saying. It's called the self-licking ice cream cone. And that's kind of like what he was describing here. A legal system that sustains itself instead of sustaining the rule of law, sustaining your liberty, your freedom, your individual rights. And we've got to change that. The last candidate we're going to hear from is Ms. Jessica Lewis. Jessica, please come up and talk about your place in your race.
Good evening, everyone. Again, yes, I'm Jessica Lewis. I get winded very quickly. There's a baby on my diaphragm, so that is how things go. And I can barely peer over here. But hopefully I've had the opportunity to meet some of you before in some of my past, I guess, advocacy on the issue of judicial races and how important they are. But I will tell you that my colleagues here have, I think, sold that point really well of how important this is from kind of some of the societal issues. And I appreciate how JJ ended it, because that's kind of where I'm coming from, which is family, which is things that I'm looking at right now as I'm preparing to launch another one into this world, that I do think of what being a lawyer, I think of what our judicial system is going to look like as he in this case will be pursuing his hopes and dreams, having his business, raising his family, and I am concerned. I think that unlike maybe some of the past recent judicial elections, that folks who are not attorneys and whose eyes glaze over when they hear some of all this legalese have been paying attention now that, wow, it does matter if we don't have good judges in place, right? Because we're seeing some of the things around the country that are making the news, and we're like, wow, how can a judge make that ruling? And I can't go far without quoting wisdom here in Proverbs 21:15 before I launch anything else first, because this is much more important in better words than I could put together. It says, when justice is done, good people are happy, but evil people are brought to despair. And I think the reverse of that is true, right? When justice is not done, good people are harmed, and evil prospers and thrives. And that just weighs on my heart. I'm so not a politician. I am so not I'm a writer. I'm a reader and writer, which is great for appellate courts because that's what you do most of the time. I am not a big public speaker, but my heart is in this because when I look at Dallas County now in this 6-county area, I'm concerned by injustice. A little bit about me, just some of my background, and what's gotten me here is that I grew up in East Texas, Tyler. Good place, went to school in Marshall, and I didn't come from much in terms of means, single mom, small little family, and it's so much of any success. I mean, I could say looks like American dream, a little bit of that, but I would cast that aside because honestly, my joy is not in material success or worldly success and any of that, but it's truly just been surrendering to the call. And right now, when faced with the issues that are making themselves manifest in our judicial system, I think attorneys, who are the only ones that can run for these races, need to answer the call to be that backstop, to be that wall, and say that this far no further, and then take some ground. Now that doesn't mean creating a theocracy, even though I very much care about my faith. That is all that who I am, and I would welcome others to follow me in that. It's not creating a theocracy. It's not creating a situation in which we win to the detriment of others that might hold something, some different even beliefs and values. It is creating that place where you can be equal before the law, where you can have accessibility, not be squeezed every little dime out of you by the people that have the funds to get the justice that they want versus actual justice. And it's about creating a place where that can be sustainable throughout time, which is what our founding fathers set up when they came up with the checks and balances system. And so I would say that the last point that I would, a few more things, I guess, about just a little bit of my background, is that thankfully, the Lord provided, and I somehow paid for my legal education at SMU through working at a big firm. Had that experience, was able to then, after literally 2 weeks after, or a week after, paying off my student loans, which I worked hard to do. They were not just forgiven. I got a call for work for a nonprofit in which I worked in West Dallas, helping shut down drug houses, and representing folks that were being oppressed in their communities. And then when I was about 6 months pregnant with my first baby, I felt led to go back to private practice and focus on family for a season. But then these issues came up, and I realized that this is another calling that I've been pushed towards, and sometimes grateful for it, and sometimes not, because I feel like we need fighters in this, and often these fights do go unnoticed. But I say that all to say that my experience is very varied. If you look at my number, I think in whatever database that that was referenced earlier, you might not see a lot of cases in these particular courts. My experience is very varied. A lot of federal court work, other states. One thing that I would say, not to get too political, because judicial candidates are not supposed to get too political. Democrats are great at giving themselves experience, giving themselves committee positions, and you go to the websites and you can see all these little bullet points of everything that they've done, the commissions that they've appointed each other to. Whereas often folks, that on the Republican side, on the conservative side, are focused on raising their families. They're focused on going to church. They're focused on these other things. They're raising their businesses. So one of the things that I really hone in on is not just resume, though that definitely is important, and you need to have qualified people in these positions, but it is worldview. Because you will take your worldview and apply it in whatever position that you find yourself in, Lord calls you in, the positions that you accept, that worldview will be applied. We need judges that will apply a worldview that pursues truth, not position, power, prestige, money, those things, that pursues truth, that seeks to protect our freedoms, that looks at everyone as equal before the law, despite what that person may or may not be able to do for them. And that is the worldview I have, come what may. And so I'm looking forward to answering any questions. If you have any more questions too after tonight, if you want to check out more information about me, it's lewisforjustice.com.
Okay, now it is your opportunity, and I would ask that when you are presenting a question, if you would stand at your seat, state your name and what city you live in here in Dallas County, and we will just pass the mic from each one of the candidates. And so I will first give the mic to Matthew. Questions?
I have a question.
Name?
Ajua Mason, Precinct Chair, 3607.
City?
Dallas, Texas.
Thank you.
How many of, I guess, the opponents are incumbents, or is it an open seat?
Do you want to take that, or do you want me to?
No, you got the mic first.
We can go down.
Just with your opponent.
My opponent is a criminal district court judge. The person who had the seat that I'm running for opted not to run for re-election. So I am running against a judge, but not an incumbent on this court.
The current justice on place 11, where I'm running, was defeated in the Democratic primary, and so I consider that to be an open seat. The person that I'm running against, the Democrat I'm running against, was a one-term family court justice, and she lost her primary to retain that seat, and now she is seeking this position.
Before you go that,
I just want to say, because I think I forgot to say it, I'm running for place 9 on the Court of Appeals.
You didn't get it before. I'm running for the Chief Justice spot. So the Chief Justice of the court right now is not seeking re-election. And for the longest time, it looked like the candidate was going to be Denise Garcia, who currently sits on that Fifth Court of Appeals in another spot. As judges, there's no resign to run if you're running for another judicial bench. So you'll see that every so often. At the last minute, a civil judge in Dallas County by the name of Stacey Williams decided to run for this spot. Denise Garcia, despite being a Democrat, is extraordinarily well regarded. She's won recently an award at SMU and has won a host of awards during her legal career. Stacey Williams was recently called out in the Dallas Morning News for being one of the county's worst judges, as rated by her bar poll ratings for over 4 cycles now. Her response to those ratings was that it's simply like voting for a homecoming queen. That's what the bar poll means. It's not really worth anything. So the opinions of her colleagues don't matter. The opinions of the voters are the only thing that you really care about. And unfortunately, I think the voters will say otherwise in this next election to her brand of brashness. Just as an aside about that, the current Chief Justice was actually sitting in my office, in my chambers today. He was sitting by assignment. They can, when you're on the Court of Appeals, you can be a visiting judge at district courts. And he was visiting at one of the judges, and we talked for a while, and he strongly hinted that I may have his vote. But anyway, that's how bad their side is. But it's no reason to step off the gas.
And my opponent is the incumbent, has been there, I believe, just for the 1 term.
Next question. Yes, ma'am. Well, yes, ma'am. I'll come to you, Mr. Altshuler. Yes, ma'am. Name?
My name is in Texas for about 5 years. But, you know, I've been around a long time and I've seen a lot of candidates and everything go through in different cities as well. But what I want to say is we the people want to know, are you running for our purpose or are you running for your purpose? I'm just asking you right now, if each one of you will ask yourselves that, because we are tired of listening to a lot of jargon, and when you get in office, it changes. So that's what I'm asking.
That's a great question. That really is. And I'll go ahead and tell you a brief story about when I decided to run. My wife and I got married during the pandemic, so we had a belated honeymoon as a result. And we traveled to Israel, and it was a good thing we went when we did. And I had been struggling with whether or not I should run for this position. I mean, it's hard. It candidly is to upend my legal practice, which is going very well. It's hard to impose on this on my wife. And we just had a son who just had his first birthday about a month ago, so a young child. And I made the decision to run when I was at the Wailing Wall. And I was praying for guidance on whether it was worth doing this, whether it was worth putting my family through this. And I decided, or I guess I received guidance, that this was the right time to do it. This is the right election. And I firmly believe that. So you had asked about what's the reason for this. I felt like I was called to do this at this time.
Okay, Gino?
Excellent question. Thanks for giving us the opportunity to respond to it. I am running, coming from a place of a heart of service. That's part of the family of origin that I have growing up, but mainly it's well, I'm a lifelong Christian conservative Republican, and my way of looking at things is very much informed by my faith, and I have a deep belief that everyone is of inestimable value. And for me personally, that fits very well with my judicial philosophy that everyone, regardless of whether they look like me or come from my part of town or think like me, everyone deserves to live in a land ruled by law and not by judges. So if you elect me, you'll get somebody I will do the best job I can and work as hard as I can to make sure everyone has their case ruled on based on what the text of the law is and not what I think the outcome should be. So that's part of my philosophy and why I want to serve. Also, it's a very important election in the life of this court. 8 seats are up, and how voters decide can make a big difference for this area for the next 6 years. And so this is my opportunity to step up and serve.
Excellent question, because usually you are just hearing about the technical side or the nuance. I think it's tough to answer that question without saying, why you want to do it, right? And I love the ideas regarding the rule of law. I love the practice of law and being an attorney because the opportunity it gives you to advocate on behalf of others, to advocate for someone who's in a position that they can't do it for themselves. My parents both were union members. My dad still teaches at a high school in New Jersey. My mom was an investigator for the state of New Jersey at the Attorney General's office. But in what limited time they did have, besides raising a family, they were on town council and planning board, and my dad helped run the Area 3 Special Olympics and helped coach football and a little bit of baseball. They just taught us the joy of serving and the joy of having the strength to help others. And once you achieve that strength, once you stand on your own, every additional measure of strength should be poured into first family and then others in the community. And that's how you do it, right? That's how you live your life in a meaningful way. I've always bought into that. And, there was a time that I was, making great money. And I knew it wasn't the thing to fulfill me, right? And yes, that sounds selfish, but I have to, be candid and honest with you. But I love to fight. I love to fight on others' behalf. I love to advocate on the behalf of others. So as long as that aligns for all the right things, I'm going to keep doing it and doing it really hard. So, thank you.
Thank you for that question. I think, honestly, I probably touched on a lot of that in my remarks, so I don't want to duplicate those, but I will say that what I kind of referred to in terms of my history, it's been marked by doing things that others said were crazy, because it's like, oh, but you're on track to do this. You'll make more money doing this. You will have a fancier car doing that, and that just stuff doesn't impress me, because I don't think it's of eternal value. And so it has been hard to put myself out here in this position, and it is not something I can just very clearly say. It's definitely not something I'm doing for me. I am doing it, I would say, for my Lord, for my family, and then, for those who voted for me, but also for those who don't, because that's how important I think equality before the law is, right? I think one of the big issues that we see in judicial elections is the fact law firms give money, lawyers give money, and they feel like they're buying something sometimes, right? And so I will say, if I had bless any large Republican donors that want to give a lot of money to these races, but they should not be buying anything outside of caring for our justice system, right? So, I think that gets that question. It's doing it for all of those folks and our country and justice system at large.
You can keep the microphone.
Okay.
Mr. Altshuler.
Thank you. I'm John Altshuler. I live in Howell Park. I've served 3 election cycles as the Republican Party appointed election judge at LG Kingston High School. My question really is for candidate Koch.
Gotcha.
And it's to the general question, general comment made about Trump's dealings. And you characterize them as unfair and perhaps outside the rule of law. And I've pushed back specifically on the case dealing with falsifying business records. If he's indicted by a grand jury, if he's convicted by a jury, where are we outside the rule of law? Like, what's unfair about how he's being handled in that instance?
It's Koch. That's okay, though. That's fine. Well, all right. Judicial ethics. Yeah, I can't get too close regarding judicial ethics, so I may have stepped in it by stating that in the first place. But to address it and try to stay within the judicial canon, so I'm thinking a bit. There are times when a grand jury and a prosecutor, right, get the result that they wanted. But the rule of law may still not have been respected because of absence of the proper prosecutorial discretion, and then also how aspects of a case were presented, timing of how cases were presented, and certain venue issues. Forcing something to be tried in a certain venue when it may have not been appropriate. And I can probably list a host of other hypothetical situations where conviction can be reached, but it is not the lawful result. There is a Michael Morton Act in this great state of Texas. Michael Morton, I'm going to stand up for this one because this one gets me hot. Michael Morton was convicted based on some faulty science regarding arson. Right, so they found, the prosecutor found someone that was willing to say that this type of fire went this way, was clearly intentionally set. Michael Morton died in prison, wrongfully accused and wrongfully convicted because of that one expert. There are issues where a conviction is got, and it is a perversion of the rule of law.
Yeah.
And that is not to say that all the prosecutors in the world have done this. But make no mistake, every prosecutor can. Every prosecutor can subvert justice because they have the power of the entirety of the government's budget behind them. Now at some point someone says, no, we're not going to spend more money. But when you have unlimited resources to go after one individual, right, you will find instances where you will discover the crime when it's not been brought to you in a more natural way where justice is actually calling for it. the stores that are getting, completely, everything's off the shelf, right? We're going to ignore all the rest of the things that are here, but this one individual is targeted, and we're going to go through everything back and forth 3 or 4 times, and then start charging things up. So, hypothetically.
Thank you.
Yes, sir.
I just have a quick question. To the gentleman that made this comment, which rule of law are we following here that the Democrats are using? We don't have D, we have right now 1 or 2. So this thing is going on with Trump, and I don't know how he's been able to take it all in, but he does, and he did, and now they want him deep in a jail cell.
Well.
And if you look over, why did this go there? It was because it was a simple little thing, and the judge took it up all the way to 35 of those. There's no reason for that. And we have a bunch of lawyers up here. Anybody want to go get him out of that?
Okay, let's make sure one thing. Last time I checked my geography, we're in Dallas, Texas. We're not in New York. So let's talk about the issues that we have here with our Fifth Circuit Courts of Appeals and the things that are happening, and ask the questions about these individuals running for that position. Yes, sir.
Mike Hood, Dallas. Is there any reason in any of the 4 of your dealings in the law, now and in the future, where the the national Constitution and the Texas state Constitution will not take precedence over making any judgments, and is stating it in the same way with different words, are our constitutions the supreme law of the land?
Let's let Gino and Matthew answer that question.
The short answer is yes, they are the supreme law of the land. The judicial philosophy that I will use approaching that is, I am not a framer of the Constitution. My job as a judge is to enforce constitutions as they are written. I'm not a legislator. My job as a judge would be to enforce the law as it is written. Certainly, there's a lot of nuance depending on which issue you're talking about and which constitutional provision controls over another. And a lot of artful lawyering comes from getting the court to focus on one provision as opposed to another when they might be in seeming conflict. But if I were honored to be elected, my role would be to look at the facts of the case brought to the court and the law that does apply, and apply the law as written to the facts. Matthew?
I would just say I agree with that and everything he said, but to take it a little bit broader, and I think this gets to some of the other questions that we've received recently, is that my philosophy is equal justice under law. And for those of you who have received my card, it says it on the front because I firmly believe that. And I think that that really applies in a lot of different ways. And I think the way it applies to all of you in real terms is, I believe whether you are rich or poor, whether you are a plaintiff or a defendant, whether you are an individual or a corporation, you deserve to have the right to be heard. And you deserve justices on the court who are not going to be biased against you for one reason or another. You don't want judges who are always plaintiff friendly. You candidly do not want judges who are always defendant friendly. And I know for myself, and I think I can speak for everyone else up here, that if we're elected, we're going to take each case individually. We're not going to prejudge anything. We are not going to be biased in how we approach cases. And to me, that gets to the core of equal justice under law. And I can tell you, I will be that on the court. I will approach it that way on the court. And that's how I view it. And I think that's how all of us will view it.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, my name is Tammy Cook, and Tom and I are from Richardson, Texas. And my first question is to Mr. Koch. Am I saying that correctly? So I just want to thank you for standing up during the whole mask mandate. I really appreciate you doing that. I was on a city council call, and it was absolutely horrible. And so I appreciate you fighting for us. So I know you are a fighter, so thank you. But my question to you is in two parts. The first one is, how do we get Clay Jenkins off? Is there someone running against him? Maybe this isn't the right forum to do that. But
Clay Jenkins is not up in this election cycle. Clay Jenkins sits on the county commission court. He's not a lawyer court.
Great. Okay, so you answered that one. But my question to you and to the rest of you is, how will you make sure that does not happen again to not just Dallas County, but all over the state of Texas, that we are not forced to do something like that is obviously not the law?
How about JJ and Jessica, you take that?
Yeah, so real quickly, when I filed that lawsuit because the governor had GA 38, and GA 38 said you could not enforce a mask mandate, right? The only way to make sure when someone steps out of line like that in government would be to sue them. And if I had a fair hearing in one of the district courts, then that's would have been the end of it, right? Well, if you don't have a fair hearing in the district court, what do you do next? You go to the Court of Appeal. The Court of Appeals at that time, and when Niska was not on that court, was all Democrat. And they, of course, unanimously agreed with their good buddy and big supporter, Clay Jenkins. Now, eventually it got to the Texas Supreme Court where it got fixed. But again, as I told you before, right, only a slim percentage of cases ever make it to the Texas Supreme Court. So most people will be denied justice when their government has turned against them in an unlawful way. And I can, just like you're going to have constitutional originalists on this court that will follow the Constitution and then the laws of this land, I can guarantee you, when the majority is Republican, you will have us following the laws in their order of superiority, right? The Constitution, the laws passed by the legislature, the governor's executive orders, right? And some administrative law therein. But, it is a strict hierarchy. It's not sexy, but you know what? That's how the rule law is supposed to work. That's what we're supposed to do. We apply the law to the facts.
I disagree. I think it's sexy.
So in terms of what we can do, if we're elected to be on this panel of justices, we can only do what is put before us, right? So it's not that we can maybe advocate and take more of a political stance. That can be maybe done even in a kind of commissioner's court arena. I will say, though, that it does underpin kind of what we've been discussing, because, like, for example, when I decided to initially run for a district court position here in Dallas County in 2019, I had no idea 2020 was coming. Late April 2020 happened, and my opponent threw Shelley Luther in jail because of keeping her salon open, right? And so I think that, again, a lot of national even attention to that, on how important it is that the judge, that someone is brought before, right? Because if the judge does not decide who comes before them, but the judge in those positions is of the principle and the worldview and with the values that we have espoused.
Time for two more questions. Yes.
First of all, I want to thank our wonderful new...
No, that's not allowed. That's not allowed. Ask your question. Ask your question, please. Ask your question.
We're not going to win this one.
Diane Benjamin, ask your question, okay?
Other than a meet and greet. So I want to thank you for bringing our judges home. I'd like to ask, why aren't there more Republican judges seeking office?
Okay, let's go back to Mr. Kolodowski and to Gino.
So the question is, why are there not more Republicans seeking judicial office? And I think that comes down to the voters. I think it comes down to needing each and every one of you to be enthusiastic, to encourage your friends and family, your neighbor, the person you see every morning when you're getting coffee. We need each and every one of you to help us win. Because if you do that, we can win this election, and we can help bring more quality candidates to judicial races throughout Dallas County and through the other 6 counties that we have. So I think it comes back to each and every one of you, and I know we can do it together.
I don't think I could have said that better, so I'll just copy his answer.
I've talked too much, but I'll say one real quick thing. If you're good at your practice, you're a good criminal defense attorney, or you're a good civil attorney, and you live in Dallas County, and you go and challenge those Democrat judges as a Republican, your business is drying up tomorrow, right? So many good candidates do not run because they're blowing and going, and it doesn't matter how much courage you can have when your wife is telling you, or your spouse is telling you this will hurt the family. They're not going to do it. So the only people that end up running typically tend to be at the end of their career, right? And this can be their swan song. They can burn the bridges, right? Or it ends up being someone that practices largely outside of the county but lives in Dallas County. Those people are few and far between. It is very, very difficult to get qualified folks to run. Sometimes you get, some attorney that's not doing so well, and they'll throw their name in the hat. We haven't had a lot of that, but I'll tell you where you do have it. You have it on the Democrat side, because they glom onto the identity politics piece, and all the Democrat attorneys will be kvetching left and right. Oh, this idiot. Well, you allowed this to happen in your primaries because you vote for someone based on their race, not the content of their character.
All right, last question, real quick, ma'am.
Can I add on to that?
Man, you two guys, right?
I'm sorry, I was inspired and I needed to add some more. Sorry. As a young guy up here running, I kind of felt like I needed to add on to that comment there by our future Chief Justice. I am lucky in that I have a statewide practice, which allows me to run for this race, but I do take what he's saying, and that you need to be able to have a position where you're able to run and not have to face the Democrats in Dallas County every day. So I just wanted to add that on there. I apologize.
No apology necessary. Yes, ma'am, you're going to close us out. Quickly.
My time. I need to know, you say that you be honest with, when the paperwork come in front of you and, you read the appeal and stuff. You will dot, make sure the verb and the adjective do go with the action word, and you go on the facts of the law, that the law was put out here for Texas. And you also will look at every little thing, because I did a writ and I had to go, as a lawyer, go to Fort Worth and dismiss it. But if you're gonna run and you're in here with grace, make sure that you see every little dot, every little verb, every little adjective, and don't look at the person who did do the prosecution to the person, whatever. But look at the facts. And once you look at the facts, please, with grace, make sure that you get that person out of there, whether they're rich or poor, whether they bump over words like I do when I'm tired. Okay? I think.
Name and city.
Oh, I forgot about that.
Yes, ma'am.
Dallas, Texas, precinct George or whatever, 3053, diversity type neighborhood, and my car had it.
And your name.
Oh, thanks. I forgot the name. My name's Miss Allen Nelson.
Okay, pretty simple. Yes or no? Each one of you.
That's a great question, and yes, since we're limited to a one-word answer. But I've got a great long answer if you'd like to hear that as well.
Your long answer is 30 seconds.
I don't know if I can do it in 30
All right,
seconds.
next.
Yes.
It's close to 30 seconds. Yes, one of the big concepts we have is notice pleading, right? To get people in the courthouse door, to be fair to individuals, you must look at what you have from the individual as it is. Notice pleading is, we don't have big flourishes, you don't have to have fancy. If you've got what you need there to make your case, then the right thing should happen. So yes.
I would say yes, but I'll add that, again, this is where principle matters, because lawyers are pretty good at reading words in ways that are convenient, right? And so that's where it matters about the character and integrity and excellence that person brings to the bench.
Round of applause for our judicial candidates, please. It is 7 p.m., 1900 hours for you all that understand military time. Your time is important, but you are welcome to stay here and continue to meet and greet with these candidates. But I again want to go through the names of our 8 GOP judicial candidates for the Fifth Circuit Courts of Appeal: Emily A. Mescal, Mike Lee, Earl Jackson, Cynthia Barberi, Jessica Lewis, J.J. Koch, Gino Rossini, and Matthew Koch. It rhymes with something I just don't want to say. Okay, so that's what I'm trying. And Matthew Kolodowski. Thank you all so very much for coming out. And please stay. And remember that this is not anyone else's office but yours. God bless you. Have a great night tonight. Oh, and don't forget, Reagan Rawhide Roundup, Thursday the 12th of September at 6 p.m. at Gillies. And raise your hand. That is our event coordinator. Please see her. God bless you. And eat.